All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is your online version of the Bill of Rights slideshow. It is going to be the quick version because this recording only gives you 10 minutes. So here we go. For the notes, you'll need an essential question. And the essential question that was on the overhead was, what are my rights guaranteed in the Constitution? Here we go. The Bill of Rights. Here's a quick list of it. These do not have to be in your notes. We're going to go over them one by one. If you want to look this over, you can pause the video, but I'm moving on. This is crucial for your notes and for the rest of this unit on the Constitution, including the CBA, is that you understand the term common good. Common good is a term that means your rights can be restricted in certain places and at certain times for the common good. The common good, again, means that there's other people you're sharing that space with who all have rights too. And sometimes you don't get the full exercise of your rights so that other people can get along in that same space. For instance, you lose some of your speech rights at school. You can't swear without getting in trouble. You can't yell out in class without getting in trouble. And that's because everyone else at school has the right to a free public education. Your exercise of your rights can't disrupt their education. It can't take away, your using your rights can't take away other people's rights. We're going to start by spending a large part of this slideshow with the First Amendment. This is very important, and these are the rights that people most often access and use in the United States. So the First Amendment is known as the Five Freedoms because there are 5 parts to it, although not necessarily in the order that I will show you. Freedom of speech is the one I show first because I think it's the one that we probably use most often. In the United States of America, you are guaranteed freedom of speech. You are guaranteed that you get to say whatever you want without punishment from the government. Now, it doesn't mean that what you say is not going to make someone angry. You're not free from all kinds of social consequences or even business consequences, but the government cannot get you into trouble. They can't arrest you for what you say, again, within the bounds of the common good. So you get to say whatever you want, and speech isn't just the words coming out of your mouth. It is text that is in a book or on a screen. It is video. It is music. It is art that you create. It is even what you choose to wear is all covered under free speech. In fact, it is often referred to as freedom of expression. Now, we talked about the common good. Can you wear whatever you want at school? Well, no. Our school has a dress code. Well, is that dress code violating your rights? The school would argue no. And if you are arguing yes, the place that question is ultimately decided is in the courts. The courts will decide issues about the Constitution. If you feel strongly enough, you can take the government to court. And in my example, that part of the government would be the public school. And you could sue them saying your speech rights were being violated by a dress code. And then ultimately, a judge and jury would decide were your rights violated. So in your notes, free speech, you get to say or view or listen to or read whatever you want, including art and even including clothing. However, for the common good, there are certain limits. How about this? Can Mr. Donahue punish students for off-campus speech? In class, we talked about how, again, it depends on, in this case, state courts, and I gave an example of yes, and I gave an example of no. I think if you looked at LaVenture history, you would find that in the past, students have faced some consequences for some kinds of off-campus speech. The next part I'm going to talk about is religious freedom. This is, again, a reason why many of the people from Europe came to America in the first place, at least in North America, was for this religious freedom. In the Constitution, it guarantees this in 2 parts. Number 1 is that the government will not pick a favorite. The government will not establish any national religion. There is no Church of the United States. The second part is the government doesn't get to tell you what religion to believe in, or even if you're going to believe in a religion at all. So there is a separation of church and state, and there is your freedom to choose whatever religion that you like. Those are constitutionally guaranteed. And here's a question: can you pass out copies of the Bible in class? Well, the answer is probably no. You cannot. People don't send their kids to a public school to be converted to someone else's religion. So a teacher's probably not going to let you pass out a Bible in class, especially a Bible when the intent is to get people to believe the same as you do. Now, if you want to change that question, can you bring a Bible to school and read it at an appropriate time? The answer is yes. You have a right to read a Bible. Can you say a prayer before a test? Yes, as long as that prayer is not interfering with what's going on in the class. Again, religious freedom. There's a separation of church and state, and on top of that, the government doesn't get to tell you what to believe in. Freedom of assembly, like an assembly at school where we all get together in the gym, it means the same kind of thing. You have the freedom to get together with groups of people of your choosing, though. The government cannot tell you, oh, you're with that group when you guys can't have your meeting then. Again, the common good limit to that, and actually the wording in the First Amendment is to peaceably assemble. That means you only get together if you're not going to have a riot or make a bunch of fuss. Now, can teachers prevent you with meeting from groups of friends at school? The answer is depends. Is there a disruption of the school happening? In that case, the answer is yes. Petition for grievances. This basically means you get to complain to the government without getting in trouble. You can write a letter, you can send an email, you can make a phone call, and whoever you're calling, your representative or the president or whoever it is, they're supposed to listen to you because they're there to represent you. I can tell you letters are the most effective. Freedom of the press, that means, the word press means the news media. That means they not just have freedom of speech, they kind of are given a special right here. And when this was written, the only press was newspapers. Nowadays, there's all kinds of media with the internet and radio and TV and all the different kinds of publications. So the freedom of the press is greatly expanded with the technology, but it was written in part for them to pay attention to what the government is doing and inform the people about it. So the freedom of the press does kind of come with a little responsibility to be the watchdogs and tell the public what's happening with the government. Can Mr. Riddle kill a story on the LaVenture Daily Video Bulletin? The answer is yes, if it is disrupting school or school activities. Second Amendment basically means Americans have the right to own and possess a gun, a firearm. The words to keep and bear arms, the courts have interpreted this means Americans get to have a gun. Now, there, of course, are restrictions. If you are in middle school, you are not yet 18, so no, you cannot go to Walmart and buy a gun. However, and there are other restrictions that states can put on this as well, and the laws vary according state to state. But basically, the Second Amendment says Americans get to possess a firearm. And I'm going to skip this question because we're almost out of time. I skipped the Third Amendment because it's not terribly relevant today. The Fourth Amendment, though, search and seizure is. Seizure is a word in medical terms. Most students tell me, oh, it's when the guy is shaking in his body. And that is a seizure, but this is the social studies context where seizure means to take something. To take stuff or to take a person is a seizure. And you have protection against the government taking you or taking your stuff unless they have, and this is a word you should know, probable cause. And probable cause means there's about a 50% likelihood that you have done something illegal, that there's a crime that had been committed or is in the process of being committed. And if the police can establish that, they can get a warrant to search, or they can actually arrest you and hold you until there's a trial. So the Fourth Amendment is about search and seizure. Now here's what about at school? At school, does the principal have to have probable cause to search your backpack? And the answer is no. Because the courts have ruled that schools are a special case because there's so many kids here, and part of our main duty is to make sure school is a safe place for our students. So Mr. Donahue, Mr. Riddle, they don't need probable cause. They need what's called reasonable suspicion. They just need to have a hint that there might be something dangerous in your backpack, and they can search. It can even be an anonymous tip. They don't have to see anything necessarily or witness anything. Just if someone tells them that there might be something bad, they get to search. Now, the 5th, 6th, and 7th Amendments are all about this key phrase, due process of law. Due process basically means that there are rules that the government has when they treat people, and they have to follow those rules every time they deal with people, and they have to apply them the same to everybody. So an example would be if you get arrested, well, there's certain things that have to happen every time, and they can't pick and choose. They got to do it for everybody. That you have to be given a lawyer if you want one. You get to appear before a judge that who will tell you why it is you've been arrested and what is going to happen next. And this all has to happen within a fairly short amount of time. So, and there's lots of other examples too, and examples that don't include being arrested. But due process means that there's a procedure, and that procedure is supposed to be followed every time for everybody the same way. Now, do you have due process when being disciplined at school? I'm going to leave you with that question. Now, this is the 8th Amendment, and the 8th Amendment is about cruel and unusual punishment. The 8th Amendment says, no cruel or unusual punishment nor excessive fines shall be allowed. So an excessive fine would be like if you are doing 35 on LaVenture Way out here, well, you're going 10 miles over the speed limit, and you're probably going to get a ticket if you get caught. That ticket can't be $20,000. That would be an excessive fine. That most people would be greatly harmed, like they would lose their car or lose their house if they all of a sudden had to pay a $20,000 fine. So that would be considered excessive. Now, when we talk about cruel and unusual, that's where it gets to be a little more an area of debate. For instance, Washington State is one of the states that has a death penalty. Although our current governor has suspended it, would you consider the death penalty to be either cruel or unusual? I think you could make that argument, and many people have. And again, where are these arguments ultimately settled? In the courts, in the judicial branch of government. And then again, that question, is the death penalty cruel and unusual? Again, I'll leave that question to you. Now, these last two amendments are represented by this slide here, the 9th and 10th Amendment. Now, the 9th Amendment roughly says that if it's not already listed in the Constitution nor prohibited by the Constitution, then you can assume you have the right to do it. For instance, the Constitution does not mention gum chewing anywhere. So you can assume that you have the right to chew gum. The Constitution doesn't say anything about breathing air. You can assume you have the right to breathe air. Now, the 10th Amendment does step in here and give the states particular power. The 10th Amendment says if it's not in the Constitution, the power goes to the states first and then to the people. So, in the instance I gave of gum, well, the Constitution doesn't say anything about gum, so you assume you have the right to chew it unless Washington State decides it's going to make a gum law. And if Washington State makes a law that restricts gum chewing or forbids it, well, then now you have a state law that's going to tell you what we're doing about gum. If Washington State doesn't say anything about gum, then the 10th Amendment says, like the 9th Amendment does, then the power goes to you. Here, a real example would be schools. The Constitution doesn't say anything about schools, so the states get to make the rules for schools. When you go to get a driver's license,